Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, this is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. Today on the podcast, we have once again Frank Wylie. He's running for city council in the city of Heber Heights, Ward 3. So without further ado, let's talk with Frank Wylie. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Mr. Frank Wylie. Mr. Wylie, thanks for coming back on Truman's Town Hall.
I appreciate you having me back, Matt.
No problem. The campaign is just about over. Election day is coming up next week. Are you excited?
I am super excited. It's been a journey. It's been a long journey to get here. Started almost a year ago, and it's down to the wire at this point. And I can't wait till Tuesday to get out, and hopefully we have a really good turnout, and that the weather's much better than it was for the primaries, and we get as many people out to vote as possible, and encourage them to cast a vote in my direction from Ward 3.
Great. Since we last spoke, there's been quite a few issues that have come up, and I've paid a little bit more attention. One of the major issues that folks are talking about right now is water infrastructure. What are your thoughts about everything that's been talked about up at the council meeting and throughout social media?
Yeah, water has been and infrastructure in general has been a big buzzword and topic for the bulk of this year, and everybody who's running is talking about it, including myself. I've been hanging around council for the last 8 years, and when all the different projects were coming up and they talked about water softening, increasing water pressure, putting in closed loop systems where the high pressure wouldn't go down into the lower pressure areas. And they talked about the potential of what's going on right now. There was some concern originally about whether or not water softening could cause some of the mineral deposits to come off of the pipes and cause some breaks, which we may be seeing right now. There was some discussion about the increased stress on the system with the older pipes possibly causing what we're seeing now. It's kind of been building, I think, to a head at this point and it was naturally probably coming. These pipes are really old in the original areas of town, and tying in new systems to that is going to put an increased stress across the board in the system. So I'm interested to see if this lining project that's going on is going to be as effective as we hope. But I'm definitely encouraging, and I put a post out a while ago about some alternative technologies to try to see if there's a way that we can utilize and think outside the box to maybe get a bit ahead of this. Because even though it's something that our engineering department says, we know that this is probably going to come, and we can't always predict where the breaks are going to happen, and that's probably true. I mean, the pipes are buried underground. You wouldn't necessarily know right away which area is going to go, but we seem to have a pattern of some of these areas that have had well over 100 breaks in the last year around town, and the residents are frustrated with this, and they do want some answers and some real solutions. So I definitely hope that we can come together as a council and as a city and really get some results for these folks and try to get ahead of this so that they don't have to be constantly doing boiling water under advisory or having new water features show up in their front yards in the middle of the night, because
Right.
that is frustrating. And somebody rightfully pointed out, I don't know what the cost would be to the city for some of the robotic technology, sonar technologies that are out there that some municipalities are using. But what they were able to show in the resources I put out there was they were able to save money to the cities that utilized them in early identification, because they would catch things before they became a major break. And possibly that could be used for targeting the lining project if that's the way that we need to go. Catch a small leak, line it before it becomes much bigger.
You're talking about the ground penetrating sonar type stuff?
Yeah, they've got that, and they've got these robotic technologies they can actually put in the water lines while they're running and send them through, and they take readings of the pipes on the way through. It's some pretty interesting technology. It probably costs more than we may have, because I know that it's been talked about that we have a surplus in the bank right now, and then former Mayor McMaster's rightfully pulled out some financial data that showed that without the CARES Act and without some of the grant funding that's been made available, we may be at risk of spending more than we're bringing in, which I'm hoping that doesn't become a pattern, because that was discussed, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, where the mention was that if the spending of the city continued the way it was, and this came from the finance director, that they feared that we would run out of money in the general fund by 2024. And I think that's kind of righted itself a little bit. But we need to definitely make sure that the money we do invest is good investment and is going to be lasting, so that we don't spend the money that we have for proactive on having to be reactive all the time and constantly patching pipes and holes in the street.
So what are some of the concerns with spending in the city that you see, and that maybe you would try to be a voice against spending more?
Well, I think we really need to kind of look at what we're doing. There was a lot of money spent on acquiring property for reinvestment, which so far is working out fairly decently, but that is definitely risky. Whenever as a city you get involved in real estate, you're kind of rolling the dice as to whether or not you're going to actually get a return on investment. And some of the times, like the city center project that's coming up here, is more for the people. It's something that they've been asking for a long time down there at the Brant Pike revitalization area at the old Marion Meadows. And it's not always about making sure the return on the investment's there, but if you do it that way, you have to make sure that you're not overspending in other spots. We need to make sure that the tax revenue that we are getting back is going to meaningfully offset some of the costs. And it does appear sometimes that the developments get a lot of breaks to entice them to come in, and then we don't see a benefit from some of that for quite a while. The Montgomery County TIF district that was brought up in the last council meeting, with the extension of that over the next 30 years, they're talking about, a breakdown of 30 to 60 million. They're estimating of possible revenue coming into the area from that, which is, 2 to 5 extra $1 million per year if you average that out over the course of that 30 to 40 years they're talking about, which is a pretty decent return on that. But if we're spending 11 million or 12 million, which is what was indicated in the chart that was put out by Tom McMasters, then that's really not going to offset what we're doing. So balancing out the budget and running it like a business, like what we've been told for the last 4 years, is a good idea, as long as we kind of monitor what's happening there, and just being good stewards and making sure that we ask the right questions, and making it so that the city really does benefit as a whole, and not just one or two areas, or it's projected out so far that by the time we get there, we're not going to really appreciate the gains that we're getting.
Right. The city has borrowed some money, and
Mm-hmm.
they use the technical term bonds. It looks like they just refinanced some bonds. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have some mixed feelings, but I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, and if the balance sheet is as good as what it is, I know we have to watch our Moody borrowing score, and sometimes the amount of credit that you have against how much you actually have in the bank increases your ability to borrow and increases your rating, and you want to be as close to an A+ rating as you can as a municipality. So if you need to borrow money, you can. But if we actually have a surplus of as much as what's being reported of $60+ million, I don't see the point in necessarily refinancing $2 million here, $4 million there in bonds. Just pay the debt and zero that out, and then reallocate the funds. It's budget time. Move that money over into another area and start knocking down some of the other debt that we have. We're paying on interest versus principal on a lot of things, and you never get the city out of a debt kind of a setting. What happens if we have a lean year or 4, or if the bottom falls out of markets, and now we don't have that extra revenue to go, but we still have the debt to pay, and we end up getting upside down at some point? We got to kind of move, I think, into more future thinking. Saving money by the refinancing that they did is good in the short run. And yeah, it saved a couple $1 million from what Scott was reporting, $2 million here, and I think he said the total was almost $4 million by the time it was all said and done, which is great. But if the refinancing could have been paid off instead of just refinance, you save a lot more in the long run, because you're not paying interest anymore.
Exactly.
And you can actually reinvest that principal, kind of like a household budget, where you don't necessarily have more money, just make it work smarter for you.
So that would be interesting to look into, I think.
I think so, and this is the right time of year to do it when you have everybody looking at budget items. You have the finance department is in high gear, getting ready to set up the next fiscal year's budget. And if they don't get it this time, then definitely throughout the course of next year, it would be critical to look at throughout the year and say, where can we actually reduce our overall debt so that we can do things like adding more policing, add more fire equipment confidently without having to look back and go, do we have the money for that? Or if we have aging building structures within the city itself, there's been some discussion that Public Works needs a little more space. As we grow, they're adding more equipment, they need more room. Well, we have money to be able to possibly do that and support that well with equipment, I think, without having to necessarily worry about moving things around so much and robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, in order to get things done. Will be a little more smart allocation of our debt versus income ratios.
Right. You're out campaigning, and what are the folks, or what types of issues are the folks bringing up to you outside of this infrastructure issue that we just talked about? What are you hearing out there?
It depends on which area of the ward that I'm walking in. If I'm closer to where the water main problems are, that's obviously their focus. Some folks are concerned that we are building too many apartments and housing, and they want to see different kinds of investment and different developments coming into the area. There's some folks, clearly one of the big things they talk about is traffic, and that's probably going to be a constant conversation until the solutions or the alternatives they keep talking about to help are actually implemented.
What are those solutions? What have you heard?
Well, what I've heard from the meetings I've been at, the planning commissions and the council meetings that I've been able to attend or listen to online, they're talking about adding a dedicated lane on Troy that goes straight to I-70 to try to decompress that a little bit. They're talking about possibly widening Merrily Way, resetting and retiming the lights so that they move a little bit better. They've already added in some turn lanes coming off of Taylorsville onto Troy. They're looking at some other options for that. And there was some discussion with the development down here at the end of Ward 3 that's going in at Taylorsville and Troy there, possibly trying to find a way to connect Taylorsville across towards Merrily Way in that direction to decompress. But all of the things that are in the planning phases that haven't actually been able to happen yet doesn't necessarily decrease the stress of the citizen right now that's driving through, that's getting stuck in traffic. It's kind of like saying, well, the help is coming, but it might be a year out or 2 years out. Now, I've still got to deal with that for that time. So there's a lot of folks that are frustrated that feel like there's a lot of conversation going on and very little actual action happening. And so I'm hoping that we can start seeing some of these things implemented, especially down at the end of Troy, down by Merrily Way, heading over to I-70, to at least see if that's possible to actually help decompress that before we add more development in. And the concern to the folks down there at the end of Taylorsville is that they're going to have a Merrily Way down there and not be able to get out of their houses, not be able to turn out certain ways. They're going to have to go way around, maybe back up to Brant Pike to get around. And until the projects actually start getting underway or there's some real solid traffic studies and planning, there's not a whole lot anybody's able to say right now that's going to allay their fears. They feel some of the folks are saying they feel like it's empty promises and empty words, but they don't know. They don't know whether to trust that it's going to get better or fear that it's going to be worse. And only time will actually tell if they're going to be right or wrong.
A lot of talk about new housing developments. Lots of talk about that. Mm-hmm. Even so that there's talk about annexing land out of Bethel Township. And I'm sure you're following that. What are your feelings on the annexation issue?
I'm not for us annexing north into Bethel Township because that is exactly why we're not part of Dayton. When we were Wayne Township and Dayton wanted to come up and do the same thing that we're looking to do to Bethel, the citizens organized and petitioned and got it out to incorporate into Huber Heights in order to prevent Dayton from doing that.
Right.
The difference is Bethel doesn't have the density right now to be able to petition for incorporation into a city status. So they're kind of at the mercy of whatever's going to happen. The fact that Bethel has presented that was part of their development area to begin with. They actually passed some levies and they had some meetings, and that's a planned development area for them. They've run utilities all the way down 40 that they said they could tie into. They have their own police and fire capabilities out that way in order to handle the development. I think they've got a very good point that the developer should have approached Bethel Township or the property owners and the developers together should have gone to Bethel Township and said, hey, we want to sell our land to this developer. It's going to be kind of an extension of a development that's already currently in Huber Heights. We know that you have the ability up here. Let's go ahead and work together and create that end in Bethel Township. And it would have been within the school districts. It would have had everything that Bethel Township has to offer that attracts their people to come up there and want to live up there. The space between, there would have been some breathable area. It could have been a very nice development that way. But instead it came back to Huber, where the density issue is quite different. Huber codes allow for a lot more housing, so their fears are going to get 900 new houses up there. We've already signed the service agreement and then tried to walk it back. That's part of my frustration right now, is that a good idea is a great idea or an okay idea until it's implemented, but we need to think it all the way through. When somebody approaches with a type 2 annexation to begin with, that is definitely property owner and developer driven. That's not city or township driven. So that takes some of that off the table. But then they have to come and get agreements of who's going to provide the services once we build the houses.
Right.
So the fact that they didn't approach Bethel first, there should have been at least some working knowledge of our neighbors of what they're doing to know that there are utilities down that way. There are services able to be provided, and said, well, wait a second, have you talked to Bethel Township, because that's where it sits right now, before you come to us and ask for the possibility of support for an annexation. And then we get the service agreement letter that's presented as, this is just saying if the annexation goes through that we're able to provide the services. Having that letter is a critical part of the process to allow the annexation to go through without any problem. Miami Township right now doesn't have any reason to vote no, really. The only reason would be is if they have, and that could be considered politicized, but they got folks that are up for election. The citizens are unhappy. That would be about the only motivation I could see for them to say no. The property owners want it to happen. The developer wants it to happen. And they've now got a signed service agreement from the city of Huber Heights saying that we'll provide the utilities and everything else for them. So it sounds like it's pretty much a done deal on that end. Now, when they vote tomorrow, if they vote for it, the law director has said that there's a possibility that Huber Heights could say, no, we're not going to support that. I'm not entirely sure what kind of ripple effect that's going to go, because all the way up to that point, they've told the developer that basically they're on board and they're in support of all of that until the pushback happened.
Right. That could probably set them up for some legal action.
I would hope not, but this is part of that rushing into decisions that I'd like to see it slow down a little bit, because one extra meeting, a couple extra conversations, digging in and making sure that everybody understands what was happening, I think could have prevented some of the backlash that we're seeing. And I know that anytime people are talking about things, it's like, well, this is all political. It's an election. It just happens to be happening in an election year.
Right.
If it was an off year, it'd be the same conversation. We'd have the same people upset probably, and it wouldn't be a matter of saying, well, somebody's campaigning on this or campaigning on that.
Well, that's a cop out, in my opinion. That's a cop out to try to alleviate some pressure off of folks' candidates that they support. They always come out online and the Facebook and talk about how my candidate, this is all about politics and this. It's just a cop out in my opinion, but
yeah, and it's great to support your candidates. It's
Sure.
great to have passion for the process, and I love that people are coming out and talking about it. The part that's frustrating is how personal it's getting. We're all neighbors. We all live here. When this election's over, we're still going to be residents and neighbors, whether or not you win or lose the election. So there's really no point in getting personal about things. You can have a difference of opinion, and we're all grown-ups. We can talk about that and say, well, I don't agree with that, and that should be fine. That doesn't seem to be happening an awful lot. It does in some areas, but a lot of folks are taking it to a personal level, and that's a little disappointing because at the end of the day, I think we all want what's best for Huber. We just may have a different idea how to get to that point. And that's why people are running right now. If everybody agreed with everything that was going on and everything was wonderful, we'd have all uncontested seats.
Right.
There'd be no reason to get up and say, hey, I want to throw my hat in the ring. I myself, I got up because I've been going to meetings for 8 years. I've been watching what's been going on. I've been part of the Athletic Foundation. I was public relations for a long time for them. I'm the secretary for the board now. So we have a vested interest in the community. We've been giving as much money as we possibly can from what we earn from bingo and fun. And like the fish fry supports our scholarships. Bingo supports all of our donations and grants and giveaways. So we're really interested in the health of this city and what's going on with the kids and what's going on with the nonprofits and how we can be a good steward of that. So I spend a lot of time in and around these meetings, whether it's online or in person. And I've been getting up a lot more in the past few years talking about things, and it's time to say, hey, I'm done complaining about things or believing I could do better. Now it's time to maybe prove I can do better and get up and actually do this. I'm not a politician. I never have been. I'm a behavioralist by trade. I've been working with mental health and addiction for 23 years and a lot of different settings, folks getting out of prison, developmental disabilities. I've taught in behavioral junior high for students that are struggling in their home districts. They send them there to learn how to kind of control their anger, deal with their impulses, and get to a point where the district can take them back in. I've taught college before. I've been a problem solver for 23 years with people, and I can work with just about anybody. As long as they don't ask me to do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, I can probably get on board with it. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. And I've worked with folks before that I wouldn't invite to the barbecue in my backyard, but if they're doing a good job and they're doing what's right by people, I can back them 100%. So, and I think we need to get back to that. We're a small town. I love small towns. I came from a small town, born and bred, Portland, Ohio, Catawba Island. We had about 8,000 people when I was growing up. I love small town. I lived in northern Kentucky in a small town rather than Cincinnati when I lived there because I like the small town feel. And Huber Heights was very attractive to me when I got a job up here around Dayton to move here, and now I own a home here. So I love the community feel. I don't want us to lose that. I don't want us to become so divided that people don't think that they can work together anymore or talk to each other anymore. And I'm hoping that on November 2nd that I can get in a position where I can speak for more people and have more impact on what's going on in this town. And I'm ready to get to work.
Where do you see the divide coming from?
Every time I think I have it figured out, it shifts. It seems like that there's polarizing topics. I mean, you brought up infrastructure with the water mains. That's the new polarizing topic. The annexation's a polarizing topic for some folks. I mean, there are some people that are absolutely 100% for it. They think it'll be the greatest thing to be done. There's folks that think that the city's doing everything they can to deal with the water problems. Are usually the folks that aren't living in the neighborhoods that are dealing with it. So you've got folks that are very passionate about what's happening in their neighborhoods, and then you got other folks on the other side. They're saying everything's great in my neighborhood, so why are you whining and fussing? And they're getting personal with each other. There's a strong divide now between candidate supporters, and normally that would be just an okay thing. My fear is that if it continues to stay personal, that it's going to cause some wounds that are going to be very hard to heal. And Huber Heights has always come together as a community when things matter, and I just hope we don't lose that.
What do you think the fix is? And I'll put this out there. I'm an admin of a Facebook group called Brick City Town Hall. I think you know what that is.
Yes, sir.
It was developed because there was another Facebook group out there that was censoring a lot of things and deleting things and not letting people talk about things. So I created this Facebook group so folks could feel free to talk about whatever they want. Oftentimes, things on that page get a little rowdy. And for me, I feel sometimes it's needed, but at the same time, I also worry that maybe we go a little too far in allowing what we allow. So, what would your thoughts be? Do you think social media is the major role in this? And is there something we can do about, allowing freedom versus, censorship? Or what are your thoughts on something like that? Because for me, I believe if these folks actually who argue on Facebook or whatever, or have discussions, if they actually got into a room together, these conversations would not be the way they end up online. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. Social media as a main communication platform, I think, has really diminished people's ability to have civil debate with each other. A lot, and you're absolutely right. I've seen it happen where folks that have been arguing and screaming basically online, when they sit down with each other and they talk about things, they don't go to that level. They don't want to act that way in front of each other. And that's the art of the conversation. We can vehemently and passionately disagree with each other. And if I'm sitting in a room with you, I should still show you dignity and respect. And I would expect the same back, even if we absolutely cannot come to a point where we agree on anything. Just as human beings, we've lost that ability, I think, in some levels to have that decorum. That's why I love the sit-down meetings and talking to people. I've done quite a few of those along the way over the last year with folks that have had concerns and issues, and they've been quite passionate about what they're talking about, but at the end of the day, it's a conversation. Where you look at online, I can say what I want on a keyboard, ignore my phone for 2 hours, come back, pop on and go, oh, really? And type more stuff. But I don't have to actually be in front of somebody. So there are folks that are saying things that could be potentially libelous, slanderous, hurtful, purposely mean, for no other reason than to just do it because they're sitting in their living room, their car, or their office, or wherever they're at, and they don't have to deal with any immediate blowback from it other than somebody typing something back. So I think that there's a Netflix series out there that I can't remember the name of the
Social Dilemma.
Now. Social Dilemma, that's it. That talks about how this whole process has kind of gone along and how we've been manipulated into certain ways of believing of things that we're entitled to say, things that we think we're able to do. And I'm all for free speech, but you definitely don't want to make your free speech purposely harmful to somebody else. There's nothing in humanity that says that I have a right to purposely hurt you for no good reason other than I feel like saying something awful to you today. And
so how do you feel? How far is too far, in your opinion?
I think that if you become threatening to somebody else, that's an automatic for me. Even as a therapist, I mean, that's a grounds to get you hospitalized if you start threatening folks. So I think if you get to a point where you're causing somebody to have legitimate physical or mental symptoms, you've gone way too far. If somebody asks you to kind of stop, or they try to respectfully back out of a conversation and you keep at them, I think at that point you're deliberately trying to be hurtful, and at that point you need to stop. I'm not really for a whole lot of censorship, but I figure if you're going to allow one opinion very loudly, you have to be willing to hear the opposite side.
That's how I feel.
Especially if you don't agree. And a prime example from my own personal history, I went to the University of Toledo, and back at that time there was an announcement that was made that we were going to have a rally with a speaker come in, and we were interested to see what the president of the college was talking about, and they were going to have Louis Farrakhan come and give a speech.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately afterwards, I want to say it was David Duke, back in his heyday, had petitioned the University of Toledo to come and speak the very next night. The university was denying him to come because they said it was going to cause riots and problems and hate-filled things. As a student body, we all came together and we walked down there and we said, look, if you're going to allow one, you have to allow the other, or don't bring either one, because it's going to cause problems either way. Neither one of these gentlemen right now are basically preaching unity or anything along those lines. And so if we're going to have one side, you got to hear the other. So what the president of the university decided to do was not let either one of them come. But there was an open-mindedness of the student body that said, look, we're willing to listen to both sides and make our own mind up. We don't need somebody telling us what we need to think, feel, or believe. And censorship is a real good manipulative tool that says, only pay attention to what I want you to hear. Don't listen to this side, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure you can't even see this side anymore. And
Right.
People have forgotten how to think for themselves. It's real easy to pick up a soundbite offline and run with it. It's real easy to look at something somebody posts out as fact and never do any background research of your own. And then you get fired up and you take a whole path down and get everything sideways when all you had to do is hit the pause button and say, what are the facts here?
Certainly.
What's really going on? What are they trying to say? What's the opposing viewpoint? and what do I believe? And then follow what you believe based on facts, not just opinions or what somebody tells you should think.
What year was Farrakhan and Duke coming to Toledo?
It would have been, I want to say it was 95 or 96.
Okay, so it wasn't, I mean, well, I look at back, that's 20 years ago, but for me, it's like it's not that long ago. But I guess 20 years is a long time.
And it's almost 30 now.
Right.
But yeah, it was early on in my college career there. It was sometime between 94 and 96. And and that was before Columbine and everything else was happening at that time as well, which was a really just it started a whole lot of turmoil in the country. There was a lot of dialogue about what people thought about that. That started the gun control debate that's been going on for almost 30 years now, and it was a whole lot of stuff going on. And the difference I noticed back then to now is people could sit down and talk things through. They could sit there, they could hear each other, they would listen to each other. And that's something that I was taught how to do at a young age. I've been educationally, classically trained to listen to folks and reflectively listen.
Right.
And be objective on things. I've been in management before. I've had people come into my offices at different times screaming and hollering about something they believe was a big injustice. You listen to them, you hear them out, you don't dismiss it at face value, you don't belittle them, and when they ask a question, you give a response based on empathy and fact. You validate the fact they have a concern, which I haven't seen a lot of lately. And prime example was the last meeting. We had a citizen come up and was talking about her concerns, and there wasn't a lot of validation of saying, hey, I hear you. Whether or not you believe the concern to be valid or not, whether you're waiting on anything to kind of factually back it up or not, the fact that somebody felt strong enough to come down and passionately talk about what they believed in needed to be validated to say, I appreciate that, I hear you.
I believe that it is so important, and I wish more counselors would or council members would encourage the citizens to come to council meetings, to get up and speak. It's difficult to get up. They're sitting up on top of this, little dais,
mm-hmm.
and they're looking out upon their, sometimes it feels like they're looking upon their subjects, but it's difficult. And I say that joking, but it's difficult to get up there and speak and to talk about the issues that you hold dear to your heart. Because I listened last week, and I admire anybody who's able to do that, regardless if I agree on the subject or not. That's awesome to get up there and do that. So I listened to the council meeting this last week, and there were quite a few citizens that got up and spoke. There was a couple folks talking about water, and there was one citizen that was talking about COVID and mandates and things like that. Where do you stand there? Well,
we know more now than we did last year about what this virus is capable of and what it can do. I really do believe that it should be a personal choice when it comes to the vaccines or the shots, whatever you want to call them, that if that's something that you feel passionately about, that's great. Do it. If it's something you have questions or concerns, talk to your doctor about it. I'm not a fan of anybody telling me that I have to do something or anybody else if I'm not 100% sure. Allow people to do their research. Allow people to talk to folks that have had the vaccine versus people that haven't. Really kind of look at all the data that's out there. And there's a lot of data out there to sort through, so it can be very confusing at times. But I really encourage folks to talk to their doctors, especially if you have a medical condition. There was a lady that got up this last meeting and was talking about how she has a medical condition that doesn't allow her to wear masks. I'm not a doctor. I can't necessarily refute what she's saying. And I can't tell her, well, hey, you just got to throw a mask on if that's going to cause her breathing difficulties. She has young children, and if her doctor tells her that if she wears a mask on, it's going to constrict her breathing, I'm going to go by the person who went to medical school. I went to school for behavioral health. I didn't go to medical school. So I think that if you want to wear a mask, wear one. and I've done that before. I myself, I did get the vaccine. I got the Johnson & Johnson. But that was after a lot of research on the 3 ones that were out there and what I thought what might be the safest for me. And I made that personal choice. But I still every now and again will throw a mask on if I'm concerned about the situation I find myself in. Most of the time I don't, because if I'm to trust the fact that the vaccine's going to work, then I should be fine. If somebody doesn't trust the vaccine's going to work, there's a huge divide in this country right now about the my body, my choice versus on certain issues versus we should all do certain things on others. And a lot of polarization's happening there. I mean, families are getting mean with each other about it. Cities are getting kind of on board with some of that. And I'm not sure that we're not running the risk of getting the governmental overreach. And I'm not a big fan of that. And I'm really not a fan of overreach. I think that as a government, and if I'm up there on council, part of the job is trying to come up with the best policies and legislation that's going to be the best for the city and the citizens as a whole without infringing on their individual rights and liberties. There's a fine line between that. An elected official is a representative of the people, and they always will be a representative of the people. So if the people say, we need something, a little stronger language, and it's an overwhelming majority of the people, then you represent the people's wants. You come up with something that makes sense for that. But I think if you arbitrarily make decisions because you're elected and therefore you are the decision maker, then you run the risk of letting a little bit of power and authority go to your head.
Right. So I did go to nursing school. I'm a nurse, and I also was a combat medic. I even studied at one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country, Rush University up in Chicago. So I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, but I have an ability to read certain documents, peer-reviewed journals, things like that. So in my opinion, I believe that you don't necessarily have to be a doctor. In fact, you can just have common sense and realize what is happening now, and this is just my opinion, is government overreach is happening, and there's a lot of effects that come from that. Think about the supply shortage. It's hard to buy a car. All the, inflation has risen. These are all things that I think are directly related to all these mandates, to all these shutdowns. And it's not just in the United States. They're shut down in Australia. They're shut down New Zealand for one case, things like that. So I could go on a tangent about that. But anywho, if you're elected, Dayton has just mandated their employees to be vaccinated. Would you vote if someone brought this up? Would you vote for the City of Huber Heights employees to be mandated to vaccinate?
No. At this point, I can't see myself casting a yes vote that would cost somebody their job if they were utilizing their own medical common sense and decision making. I would say that if it came down to a point where a decision had to be made, allow them to wear a mask, because if the masks work, they're fine too. Have them, say, well, if you don't want to get a vaccine, that's fine, wear a mask and go from there. If they have a medical condition that says they can't wear a mask, then there's COVID testing that can be done. There's ways of getting around the point of threatening somebody's livelihood. I know that there historically have been jobs out there where if you didn't have certain vaccines on board from childhood, that you wouldn't be allowed to work in that field. You had to have hepatitis series at one point. You have to have tetanus shots. You have to have your MMRs, your boosters, and in order to work in healthcare. And I know folks that are in the military, they line up and they get shots for things that we don't even know the names for probably.
Oh man, I had it all. I had anthrax, smallpox, you name it. They was like, do you have a record of an MMR? I'm like, I don't know where I would find that.
So here you go. Have another shot.
Here, have another one. So, yeah.
And that's,
and I actually developed autoimmune disorder from all that. So there's real concern.
Right.
I look at these vaccines and I don't take away from anyone who chooses to get a vaccine. That's their choice. That was your choice to get a vaccine. It's whoever choice. But there are, I look at it as a gene therapy. It's not necessarily a vaccine. The mRNA is a new, yes, it's been studied for a long time, but it's been studied and failed quite a bit. So there's just a lot of things out there that we just don't know. And for governments and businesses to be mandating vaccines and mandating masks, I think we're going in a place we may not come back out of as a country, as the United States, and what we actually stand for, which is freedom, in my opinion.
True. And this disease is serious. I mean,
certainly,
I've known people in my own circle that have had it. I know a couple folks that have had it more than once. I've known people that have passed away from it. It's not something to be taken lightly, and I think that, like any kind of viral respiratory issue, common sense can prevail with this.
Right.
If you don't go around the elderly, babies, immunocompromised, and developmentally disabled folks during cold and flu season. Normally, it's been for years, the hospitals limit visitors during cold and flu season. If you have a sniffle or a symptom, they don't want you coming in and visiting folks that are already sick because you can make them more sick. So we already kind of had some of the things in place to help common sense prevail to protect folks. But, do what makes sense. And if getting a vaccine or getting the gene therapy, whatever you want to call it, is going to make sense for you, do that. And be confident in your decision. And nobody should judge you for that decision. If you choose not to get a shot or a vaccine for this, and somebody asks you to politely put on a mask, do so. There's no point in arguing with that. That will help them feel more comfortable, even if you don't think it's useful. It doesn't really hurt anything unless you have a medical condition that says, if I put this mask on, I won't be able to breathe. Then kind of explain that to them. Go, look, I can't breathe with a mask on. I've got chronic emphysema, COPD, asthma, something. And, and kind of move on, but keep your distance from that person, then you'll be fine. Hopefully, and everybody should be able to protect each other that way. It really kind of runs the risk between protection and violation of human rights, and it's a fine line. And I know a lot of people have a lot of passion about it,
right, on
both sides of it, and that's okay. Everybody is allowed to, have their opinions based on the information that they have in front of them, and it's okay to talk about it. I've had some conversation with folks, and I went in with an opinion and walked out with a different one before. There's nothing that says that an opinion is cut in stone based on the facts. There may be stuff I haven't read, I haven't seen, I didn't know. And I'm always willing to learn more about things that I don't know about.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of things we can do to boost our immune system that help combat some of these things. I know folks who've had COVID, who've just gotten over it. Some have had a bad bout with it. Some have just taken ibuprofen and trucked on the next few days after. So it's
right.
I definitely believe the coronavirus is out there, and it is hurting a lot of folks. But I believe most folks are surviving from coronavirus.
Which is amazing.
I'm not a big fan of the masks at all. I'm not a big fan of schools mandating masks. I'm not a big fan of mandates, period. But anyway, so what else have you been up to out there on the campaign trail?
Well, we've been having some meet and greets out there. We're getting ready to have another one tomorrow night at Classic Pizza at 7 o'clock. We're having one at Food Bazaar Saturday morning at 11. So we're trying to get out there and talk to people. I'm trying to get out and get in front of as many people as possible, create some fun events and things where folks can come and talk about things and, get some food, sit down and make it casual. Instead of it being just, I'm going to sit here, you come and either yell at me or you come and tell me I'm doing awesome, because usually it's one or the other. But,
have you experienced angry voters?
I have, and that's okay. They're passionate about things. They've been very respectful about it, but they've kind of made their point very clear, and that's perfectly fine. And the interesting part about it is, it's not about me or my opponent. It's about politics in general. They're angry at the city as a whole, and they don't want to talk to anybody that has anything to do with the election or government. At that point, are typically the most angry ones. I have not come across anybody yet that has been disrespectful or nasty that is supporting my opponent, and I don't believe I've heard that any of my supporters have been disrespectful to any of my opponent's people, and I really appreciate that. That's what it needs
Definitely.
to be. The most angry folks are angry in general, that they don't believe that the city is listening or cares about them at all, so they're not even bothering to come out and vote half the time. They've got no soliciting and no trespassing signs up, and they really don't want you coming anywhere near or even walking around the properties. Those folks are the ones that there needs to be a lot of healing for. There needs to be some solid demonstration, not just words, but actual demonstration that they're valued. And they haven't felt valued in a while. So that's going to be something that as a council, with the mayor, city manager, and city staffers, we have to figure out a way to reach the folks that don't believe that anybody up there, no matter who it is going to care about what they care about. And that's going to take a lot of healing, because there's been a lot of division for quite a while, and it's starting to show.
Right. What's one of the strangest things someone has talked to you about? When I was running way back in 2015, it was about a stoplight. I mean, it's not really that strange, but it was the stoplight in front of the fire station. There was someone who was really concerned that they always trip the stoplight to allow their own vehicle to get out, or it was just weird. In my opinion, what are some strange things that, if anything?
I haven't had any real super strange issues brought up, but I have had some people kind of look and say, "Well, I didn't register to vote in this election."
For this one, the upcoming,
they haven't moved, and they were registered and they had voted before, but they're like, "Well, I didn't register to vote this time," and they will just turn around and walk away. It's like, that's not really how this works. But they weren't even pausing long enough to hear the explanation that they are registered, and as long as they haven't moved, they don't have to register every single year. That was a little bit unusual. I get a lot of, "I'm not interested in anything to do with what was going on." That's a little bit strange. But because we should be kind of interested in what's going on, but I haven't had any real odd issues like that come up. I had a conversation with somebody that had a neighbor dispute over the way the neighbor was mowing the yard and grass clippings on the yard, and asking them not to do that. And they wanted to kind of process what the city response was to them about that event prior. And it led to a really, really good conversation, and they wanted to be heard. And that's all they wanted from the beginning, was to actually be heard and validated that they had a concern.
And that's what I think that is. I say strange and weird and, put those words on it, but that's exactly what it is. Those folks who are they're confiding in you, essentially. They just want to be heard. They want people to say, okay, the city I pay taxes to, the city that I support, I want them to hear me. And I don't,
Absolutely.
And a lot of them do not feel like that. So I knew when I was going out and talking to different folks, and they were telling me all these issues, like you said, grass clippings, things like that, the stoplight. It's awesome.
And a lot of folks seem to think the government can control every business that comes to town as
True.
well. That's one that I know probably gets frustrating to the folks up on the dais right now, that unless the city owns the property, they're basically looking at whether or not the proposal meets the zoning requirements, meets city code requirements, meets legal requirements.
EPA
and all those things. Yeah, make sure the traffic studies are done. How is the impact going to be on things around? But at the end of the day, the development itself is not something that they control.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And that's
we
the
have
tough spot.
15 oil change places can pop up, 38 car washes, a bunch of the biggest thing right now. People are like, well, there's going to be another chicken place. Well, we've got almost every variety except Popeyes, and I think if Popeyes showed up, we'd probably hit all of them. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why these businesses are attracted to our area, and I would be really kind of, no pun intended, I'd really be kind of interested to see what data they're pulling. How much chicken are Huber Heights residents consuming?
I love chicken.
Yeah, I love it too. Are we consuming enough to where we're hitting like the national franchise notice of it's time to move to Huber Heights? So there are things that can be done. And I had a really good conversation with the Chamber of Commerce about how they would love to be more involved in the city development planning, and kind of, because they go out to a lot of these meetings and conventions where these potential developers go for different businesses, technologies, industry, not just housing and developers. And they talk to these folks about Huber Heights, but then they have to bring that information back and hand it off to a city staffer. And that's the end of the conversation pretty much. Then it goes to the city to kind of reach out. So I think that if we can empower the chamber, who has the time to go out and do those things, to do that job a little bit more, we may see a little bit more variety coming in if we have the area that's enticing for them to go to.
How do you think that would work? Do you think there would be the need for another commission, or just an agreement on a partnership? Or
I think an agreement would be plenty. We have a lot of commissions right now.
Right.
And like right now we have a water and sewer board and advisory commission that I've not seen really show up to any of these council meetings, work sessions or otherwise, to render a thought or opinion back, or have them be cited in a work session or council meeting about what's going on with the water and sewer infrastructure questions.
Exactly.
So we have these boards and commissions. We have these folks that are becoming content experts and advisors to the city. The Chamber of Commerce is the content and advising experts on small business. I think that if we could get an agreement that says that they can have more of the lead on doing these things, that would be sufficient. We wouldn't need to necessarily have an economic development commission per se. We already have that with the chamber.
Do you feel the chamber is staffed enough to take on that responsibility?
From what I've been told, they are confident they can handle the job. They would like to be allowed to do it.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure what it would take to make that fully happen. But I know that they would be willing to come to the table. And I know the city just reinitiated the platinum membership they had after the divestiture was walked back. I would really like to see more information, involvement, and meaningful dialogue with them. They've got their board of directors. Almost all of them are business owners themselves. So I think that's a really good pool of resources to get information and advice and direction from in that one. The Water Sewer Board would be great to actually have them be present in the meetings and give meaningful feedback. We've got a lot of really good people that are coming up and volunteering their information, education, expertise, and time that I think we can better utilize what they're doing and make it really meaningful and matter. Otherwise, it's just another meeting that goes on the books and nothing ever comes of it.
So, speaking of the Chamber of Commerce, I saw that candidates were given questionnaires, or how did that work with the Chamber of Commerce?
The Chamber of Commerce invited every candidate that was running for an office in Huber Heights to come to the Chamber and have an interview with the board members and the Chamber President, Mark Bruns. And it was a face-to-face interview. They asked a series of questions and recorded and jotted down responses. And not everybody, unfortunately, took advantage of that.
It looked like to me that there was a split. Because yourself, Glenn Otto, Richard Shaw, Naomi, is that how they? Noemi, Anita, you guys all did it.
Yes.
And I know you guys aren't running as Team Huber or anything like that, but you guys you do hold events together, and the other team, or the other group, I should say, hold of different events together. I know Gore and Burge sit out on the corners of different streets and have events. So why do you think that divide was there? If I know, didn't Mayor Gore just go speak at the Chamber of Commerce? They just joined back up. I wonder why they didn't take part in that.
I wish I could answer for other folks. I don't know. I know one person, I'm trying to remember who it was, they said that they couldn't do it because of their work schedule. And I work a crazy work schedule. 3 days a week, I'm in at 7, off at 3. The other 2, I'm in at 9:30, off at 5:30. I work an hour away from Huber Heights right now. That'll hopefully soon be changing, where I'll be moving to an office closer to home within the same company. But they were more than willing to work around my wonky work schedule, the board members' work schedules, and I was even at a conference for a couple of days out of town when they wanted to initially have it. They were more than gracious to figure out a time that worked out for all of us. And I came in, I was one of the last ones I think I was either the last one or one of the last ones because of my schedule to do the interview, but they were more than willing to make that time. So I really don't know why they wouldn't necessarily take advantage of that, because it did seem like everybody was willing to mend fences and wanted to get a relationship going. It was talked about from the dais by the council and by the mayor himself about how, repairing that relationship. There was that speaking engagement. It seemed like things were starting to get back to a better place. And I don't know why they wouldn't have done that.
When I look at it, when I look and see who went and did the interviews and who didn't, it looked like a coordinated shun against the Huber Heights Chamber of Commerce. And I, for the life of me, don't understand why that partnership isn't stronger. I know there was an incident during the protests that happened. Yes. I understand that. And I think that's something that has been worked out, or they wouldn't have joined back up. Mm-hmm. But I don't know why they would shun them again. There is no reason. So anyway.
Yeah, because there has been participation, and it's not been 100% across the board for a lot of folks with the League of Women Voters. They did a questionnaire and they did a TV interview as well. But if all the candidates running for each position were not available, then the interview didn't happen, which is why I wasn't able to do the TV spot with the ATV. Because they weren't able to coordinate with my opponent to be available for the taping on the Zoom call, and the questionnaires were filled out. It looked like, I think.
Say that again. You weren't able to do the DAT. You weren't because your opponent wasn't available.
Correct. The League of Women Voters is completely neutral, so they want to make sure that they don't appear to have any kind of favoritism to one person over another. So if you and I were running for the same political position and they wanted to do and they do it every year there's an election, they do these interviews. If myself or you, if one of us was not available on the day they wanted to do the filming, then they wouldn't do it at all, because they don't want to have one side and not have the other side's opinion put out there. I can respect that. They're actually holding to an absolutely neutral position. They ask the same questions of everybody. They give the same amount of time. They don't ask leading follow-up questions to kind of show who they would favor or don't. So if they have an opinion, you leave that interview not knowing where they stand. Okay. And that's probably the best moderation that you can do. But
they don't do a very long form interview.
No, they don't.
That was always, I mean, there is no, this is just for me, there is no substance that comes from the League of Women Voters, in my opinion. But I appreciate them doing at least something. That's great. But
they asked some pretty good questions this time when I was listening to those that were able to actually interview. But I wasn't able to do it at the primary time either, for a similar reason. I was available. My opponent was not. But I've done interviews with the League of Women Voters. I've done interviews with Dayton Daily. It seems like the email mail it back kind of process, other than GD Rhea. They did a Zoom interview just the other day, and myself, Richard Shaw, my opponent Kate Baker, Nancy Burge, and Vince King were all on the call.
Who is
along
this?
With
GD Rhea.
GD Rhea, Greater Dayton Real Estate Education Association, I believe. They kept kind of locking it down to just GD Rhea, which is easier to kind of talk about. But they educate folks on real estate investment opportunities. They manage some housing units around, and they try to educate people on housing issues in your area and how to help solve them and how to get to a better place with that. So they wanted to have interviews with anybody that was running in Montgomery County. So there were county commissioners, there were township trustees, there were the mayoral candidates for Dayton were on there. Huber Heights was on there.
Is this a recorded program that folks could download and watch? Because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, they recorded it. I have not been able to find it yet. I'm hoping that it comes up on their website as something people can look at. Especially outside, further out in the county issues, that if anybody was interested in some of the county and township trustee kind of issues, county commissioners that they may be voting for in the outlying areas, it was a good opportunity to kind of hear their perspectives and their thoughts on things.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Wylie, I think I've kept you long enough. I appreciate you coming on Truman's Town Hall. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about on these series of podcasts we've done that you want to let folks know tonight?
Well, I just encourage everybody to come on out and talk to folks, whether you agree with us or not. Just come out and talk to people. I'm approachable. I'll sit down with folks. We have a meet and greet tomorrow night, like I said, at Classic Pizza at 7:00, and that's after the Prayer for the City event that's going to be happening at the high school.
Right there at the flagpole, right?
Weather permitting, it'll be at the flagpole. I know they're trying to come up with a backup plan in case Mother Nature has other plans. I don't know if they were successful in that or not, but that's coming on, and that's a good thing to kind of come together as a city and really just realize we are, we're all humans, we're all people, we're all neighbors, we all care about each other, and we really want what's best for the city. We just might have different viewpoints on how to get there. And then come on out Saturday morning at 11:00 to Food Bazaar, another meet and greet opportunity. And then please come out and vote on November 2nd. Vote for your favorite candidate. I'm hoping if you're listening and you're from Ward 3 that you want to give me a chance to see what I can do for the next 4 years. I'm ready to do it. But definitely come out and vote. There's a lot on that ballot. There's a mayoral race on there at large. There's a tax levy renewal issue for human services. So there are some wards that are going to be voting for 3 or 4 things, and some that are only going to be voting for a couple. But this is a year where everything is on the table. So definitely come out, make your voices heard, and once elected, make sure you hold us all accountable. Make sure that we do what we say we're going to do, and be there. Speak up. Let us know what's going on. I know if I'm elected up there, I encourage that. I want to know what matters to everybody in this city.
Mr. Wylie, you said it all. Good luck on Tuesday.
I appreciate it. Thank you.